The Quarterly, Job and Proverbs, Lesson 13. Proverbs 31, 10-31. The Excellent Wife. Proverbs 31, 10-31 is an acrostic poem describing the ideal wife, in which each line begins with a successive letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It's as if you were to write a poem that went: A is for amiable, B is for beautiful, C is for cooking, D is for diaper changing, E is for elegance, giving us the A to Z of the ideal biblical woman. In this way, the poem intends to challenge and reshape our view of godly femininity. At the same time, since marriage is the primary biblical image for the relationship between Christ and his church, the image of the ideal wife will also teach us important lessons about the church. Conventional wisdom in every day and age presses upon us an image of the ideal woman, although wife and mother tend to be rather less part of that image than they were formerly. The ideal woman, according to conventional Western wisdom, is beautiful and smart, slender, and more than able to hold her own in a career. If she wants a husband and children, she can have those too, but she mustn't sacrifice her other attributes in pursuit of them. Conventional Christian wisdom, meantime, is often a lot like secular conventional wisdom, just 50 years behind the times. Some Christians advocate women pursuing the 1960s dream of domestic bliss through completely sublimating themselves in the roles of housewife and mother. Yet the picture of the woman that Proverbs 31 paints contrasts in some striking ways with the models of the ideal woman that we see both in conventional secular wisdom and in the Christian variety. Perhaps the most unnecessary line in the whole poem is the second half of verse 27. She does not eat the bread of idleness. The whole poem thrums with activity as the ideal woman labors from morning to night, accomplishing useful tasks. And that's particularly striking because she belongs to a socioeconomic class that would allow her to live the life of a sluggard if she chose. In the Hebrew order of the books of the Bible, Proverbs 31 is followed by the book of Ruth, showing us what a woman of noble character, an Eshet Chayil, looks like at both ends of the economic spectrum. The wife worthy of a king, Proverbs 31:10, and the worthy woman who has nothing, Ruth 3:11. Both arise early and set to work. In the case of the Proverbs 31 woman, she's organizing her servants, working with her own hands, running a small manufacturing business, and investing in real estate. In antiquity, there was little of the specialization of the mid-20th century, where men went out to work and women stayed home with household chores. Everyone was fully occupied with a range of tasks, both domestic and commercial. This contrasts with both secular and Christian conventional wisdom. The woman's high-flying career appeals to secular conventional wisdom and flies in the face of much conventional Christian wisdom. Yet to be this busy when you're economically independent doesn't make much sense to worldly wisdom. The idea that women, like men, are to work hard because we serve a hard-working God who set us an example by laboring 6 days of that first week, Genesis 1, seems uncommonly driven. The Proverbs 31 woman works hard not to become rich or to find career fulfillment. That's not mentioned anywhere in the poem. Rather, she strives to be productive for the sake of her family, her servants, and to be able to serve the poor and the needy in her community. See verse 20. There's no tension in the poem between the woman's constant labors and the well-being of her family. Now, to be sure, she has maidservants to help her, verse 15, unlike Ruth, who's equally busy and family-oriented. But the primary well-being that she pursues is not her own, or that of her career. It is her husband, her children, and the wider household. Notice how many times in these verses the words husband, children, or household appear. They're in verse 11, verse 12, verse 15, verse 21, verse 23, verse 27, and all the way through 28 to 31. Many people are intensely busy today, but so often that busyness drives us apart as a family and not together. Yet the key element for the Proverbs 31 woman is that all of her busyness doesn't isolate her from her family. In the midst of her busy schedule, she gets up while it's still dark to see that they have the food that they need. Verse 15. She checks they have the right clothes, whatever the weather. Verse 21. She is a blessing to her husband. Verse 12. And the moral instructor of her children. Verse 26. All those things take time, a precious commodity in her life, yet one that she gives gladly up. Perhaps the most telling comment on the family-centered nature of her busyness is the response of her husband and children. We don't hear anything about the praise of her business associates, her co-workers, her employees. They may admire her too, but their praise is not what matters. What matters is what her husband and children think. That they arise and call her blessed. That is, that they regard her as their heroine, the person who is living an enviable life. Verse 28. What's missing from this picture of the ideal woman is as striking as what's included. It's easy to tell from the pictures on the front covers of women's magazines, both Christian and non-Christian alike, which attribute is at the top of contemporary society's picture of an ideal woman. Women are supposed to be attractively packaged, with perfect hair, skin, teeth, clothes, and a perfect figure. Ancient conventional wisdom was no different, even if the perfect womanly figure back then was a little larger than the contemporary version. But none of that appears in Proverbs 31. This ideal woman could be short or tall. She could be skinny or fat. She could be pretty or ugly. Have straight teeth or crooked. None of those things matter, because what makes her the ideal woman is not her looks, but her character. The only words Proverbs 31 has for beauty are negative. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised, says her husband. Verse 30. He values her for who she is, specifically for her spirituality, not for what she looks like. Now, to be sure, the Proverbs 31 woman has beautiful clothes in her wardrobe, of fine linen and purple. Verse 22. According to Proverbs 31, there's nothing particularly spiritual about looking frumpy. But the woman doesn't spend her life cultivating her outward beauty, but her inner beauty. Her attractiveness consists not in makeup and clothes, but in a heart that is first given over to the Lord, and then given out in service to others. She places a higher priority on her time and her efforts in pursuing the Lord than in pursuing a perfect appearance. And that's not simply an Old Testament perspective. In 1 Timothy 2, verses 9 and 10, Paul writes, likewise, that women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and self-control, not with braided hair or gold or pearls or costly attire, but with what is proper for women who profess godliness, with good works. The apostle thus urges all of us, men as well as women, not to dress up for church outwardly with fine clothes and perfect looks, but inwardly with godly attitudes, desires, and actions. But who could live up to such a standard of perfection? No one. There is no wife that fulfills this picture, nor any husband who could possibly deserve such a woman. That's why we all need a Savior. We're not saved by our own perfection or even by our progress or by our good intentions. We are saved by Christ's perfection in our place. A godly mother who prays for her children and watches over them tenderly, training them in the right way to go, is a great blessing. A godly wife who works diligently and supports her husband in these ways is a treasure beyond price. Some have been blessed with just such godly mothers and wives. Some are such godly mothers and wives. Yet many don't have such mothers and wives. And some are perhaps deeply convicted that they themselves fall far short of this ideal. But even the godliest wife and mother could never be godly enough. No one measures up. The good news of the gospel is that salvation is freely available to us all, in spite of our many sins and failures. In the gospel, we discover that we have a king who went looking for a bride for himself, a journey that's depicted in Ezekiel 16. The Lord did not find a bride like the one depicted in Proverbs 31. Instead, he chose for himself a bride who had nothing to offer him, and he did everything to rescue her, in spite of her ongoing unfaithfulness and ingratitude. And one day, by God's grace alone, that defiled bride will shine like the stars, clothed in fine linen, made ready for the marriage supper of the Lamb. Revelation 19 verses 8 and 9. And on that day, she will rest from all her labors, secure in the arms of her beloved. Application questions. Who is the most Proverbs 31 woman that you know? What is it about her that you admire most? 2. How does society around us impress upon us its own version of Proverbs 31? 3. How does Christ provide hope for exhausted and discouraged women who find themselves falling short of this picture? 4. How is the church, as the bride of Christ, called to resemble this picture of the ideal woman?